that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. We should at least be prepared. And we've gone for like pretty much worst case scenario here. It's just very wet, so it should be consistent all the time. I don't think the puddles are going to get bigger, hopefully, but they also shouldn't reduce. You're not going to get a dry line in this session. So I've gone out and done a bunch of laps, and I just wanted to tell you a few things first of all before I tell you how I think you should drive this track in this car. Just some things to bear in mind, and you probably know most of this stuff anyway. I'm just going to say it so that I know I've definitely told you it. And that is some wet weather basics. So first of all, obviously it's a reduced level of grip in general, but there are some very specific features that the track has when it's wet. So first of which is standing water. So on this track you're going to find standing water at various places and quite often on a bit of track that you want to drive on. So for example, the chicane after turn 1, in fact even turn 1 on the apex and the exit, and then turn 2, the two curbs there, you kind of want to put the car exactly where the standing water is. And just because there is standing water doesn't mean that area is completely out of bounds necessarily. As with a lot of things you're going to do in this session, it all comes down to what the best compromise happens to be. Sometimes it might be better to drive a shorter, straighter line through a bit of deep water, and other times it might be best to completely avoid the deep water. It's going to be very, very situational, and this is the first big Brad wet weather tip. There is no definite answer to all wet weather driving. It's going to change track dependent, car dependent, corner dependent. And that's why it's so much more mentally taxing than the dry, because there isn't... you can't say, okay, if this track is wet, then the line is going to be around the outside of all the corners, for example, because it might not be. It might be that the best compromise is to go tight and slow and take a shorter distance. Or it might be that the best compromise is to go wide and cut back, or go all the way around the outside. You have to discover it. You have to kind of work it out in a situational, situation by situation scenario. Like, it's going to be different every time. So I'll tell you what I think the best way around here is, but you might find for you, with your particular level of current car control, it might actually be better to do a slightly different compromise. Telling you what I think my best way around here is, when I'm relying on, you know, very, very fine subconscious car control, that might not be the best way for you right now, or maybe it will be. So that's the first thing. Sorry, I know you're eager to get going. I just want to tell you these before.
No.
I don't want you to have to be thinking about it or listening to me whilst you're doing your exploratory laps. I've only got a couple more things. Really, the final thing is, there are places which are night and day more slippery than they would be in the dry. So I know you've felt this already. Curbs and white lines are, in certain conditions like these, it's like a switch. So there would be times in the dry where you would definitely run out onto a particular curb, and here, if you're on throttle with any steering angle, obviously it's going to be like absolute death. It will be the difference between going, you know, exiting the corner or facing the wrong way. So again, you have to play it by ear a little bit, because there might be occasions where it's better to go over the painted area, but with straight wheels, because it's just so much shorter than the alternative. But if you're on throttle, on the limit of grip on the asphalt, and then you encounter a painted bit, it's probably going to switch around on you immediately. So just bear that in mind. And obviously, you know, other things like you have to apply the throttle smoothly. I'm sure that's all probably obvious. But yeah, so those are the basics. I can't tell you exactly where to place the car just yet, but I'd like to watch you and see how you approach this, and then maybe make some suggestions when I've seen what you're doing naturally.
Okay, great.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, cool. Have you driven this car and this track combo in the wet, by the way?
No, I have not.
Okay, cool. Well, you're going to be going and discovering everything I just spent half an hour discovering, so let's do it.
All right.
I'll keep quiet on this first run. Let's do maybe 5 to 8 laps, something like that, because it's quite a short track.
Okay.
Feel free to talk to me if you want, but I just want to ride on board with you and just see how you figure this out. I'll tell you what. Since you're on an outlap, I'll just talk to you a little bit. What I did initially was I approached this as if it was just a slippery, dry track. So I just drove dry lines on the first couple of laps just to see what they were like. And so I had a baseline for them when I did different lines that I could compare the delta to. So I've got my optimal delta up the entire time to see what the best version of a lap is I've done so far. And then as I changed things, I could see, was this better or was this worse? So, but I started off by just trying to do dry lines, and if the car ran wide or understeered or whatever, I just went slower until it could stick to the dry line, effectively.
Made sense. So I guess I'll try that first.
And obviously, very, very realistically, the painted areas are like ice.
Yeah. I have so much less grip through there.
So don't worry that I'm just being quiet. I'm going to come back to you with loads of comments once you've had a chance to get kind of a bit of a baseline feel for it.
Yeah.
It's funny when you go off and the gravel feels like there's more grip than the asphalt.
I mean, I bet there is.
Okay, you were more prepared for the oversteer that time because you knew that, you know, it was likely to start losing the rear as the revs built up and the power increased, so that was good. I could hear you anticipating on the throttle, whereas on the previous lap, you kind of just kept your foot in and hoped, so that was good. And there's a lot of anticipation that's going to happen because essentially you know that it's going to slide, and so you have to slow down earlier than you think you should because you know it's going to go deep otherwise. You have to try and like feel the momentum that the car has before you get to the corner and account for it. So I see you avoiding the puddles in the chicane there, so it's not a bad shout. I think you could try splashing through some of those puddles and see whether or not that gives you an improved delta through that section, as long as you can maintain control. It's all about exploring and finding out what's best. It really, coincidentally, I'm about to release this evening a wet weather karting video on my channel.
Oh, nice.
And it's all similar concepts. Sorry, I'm distracting you, but that was the white line, and that was on a straight. That was the white line on a straight where you weren't really even accelerating much because you were kind of near the end of the straight. So it shows you just how little grip there is, and it's very, very hard to see the white line because the track is bright white because it's so wet. So you just have to be hyper aware of when you're at the edge of the track.
Okay, so maybe that first puddle, but not the second one.
Yeah, so you carry good speed through the first one, but what you found there is the second one basically prevents you from braking early enough to get into that hairpin. So you can use it, but you're going to have to brake really early, as in kind of before you get to it. And obviously, with standing water, the faster you're travelling, the more prone to aquaplaning the car is. So in the really low speed corners, so turn 1 for example, if you wanted to, or if you needed to, you could probably run an inside tyre through the puddle and it wouldn't really aquaplane, because you're not going fast enough to skim over the top of the water, you'll just kind of drive through it. But then in that second chicane, you're going that much quicker, and it does skim over the top of the water, so... And again, that's just white line, so...
Yeah.
That's fine. It's... As you approach the exit and you're running wide on throttle, you just have to make a judgment call of, am I going to keep going wide until I reach the white line? Do I think I can deal with it when I do touch the white line?
I thought I was going to be close, but I thought I was going to make it.
And in my practice, I did loads of this kind of stuff all the time. So what we're not dealing with in this session is how to cope with a drying track. We've gone for, like, definitely a consistently wet track here. So we'll start with this. Maybe in another session we can do a changeable conditions run.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because that's obviously another adaptation to make.
Right, and in both directions too. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
I've just put off learning this for so long, right? I've just been like, oh, well, I'll just go do something else. But I was like, at Monza, I was like, well,
yeah,
you know, I've really enjoyed doing the, you know, Creaky and Daniel and I, Phil and Creaky and I get on. So we've been doing the endurances and whatnot. It's been fun.
Yeah.
But sometimes they're in the wet, and it's just, you know, it's
Yeah, you want to have some confidence that you're going to be able to cope with those conditions and not be like, oh shit, I'm all at sea now. Like,
yeah.
So this is a really good idea, and you're right. I should have been proposing doing these sessions earlier, because if nothing else, even if this wasn't wet, if this was just a really slippery dry track, you're gonna be increasing your car control skills, because you can't help but, you know, you are being forced to control slides in every corner, and it's easy in a sticky, grippy car on a dry track to kind of just avoid that. Just drive it smoothly and don't get into the situation where you need to control the car, and you can still be pretty fast. Whereas you do not have a choice here. If you want to be anywhere near the pace, you're going to have to be on top of saving the car or preventing moments in the first place. Okay, so we'll do a couple more laps, and I'm going to start to talk to you about some more specifics.
Okay, great.
Are you finding anything improving on your delta when you do a particular thing? Like if you go wider on an entry or anything like that?
So I think tight here is faster.
Okay.
And then through this puddle, absolutely straight. Ooh, which that wasn't.
You held it, so
and then avoiding that one and then going a little bit later here, so you can cut in and get back to this drier, like higher part of the track.
Okay, that's interesting. I like it.
That was actually faster. Going wide there, going late there, and then getting straight earlier.
Okay,
That was
and
a lot faster.
And that's quite often, yeah, so I was trying to avoid... Oh, well done. You managed to keep it off the white line there. Just watch out on the exit here. Okay, so decent effort there. That was like a really strong lap compared to the others. So that's good. And you were talking to me whilst you were doing it, so that was good. Okay, so you said tight at the first corner. I think that's a good shout because it's such a long corner. If you do go around the outside, it might just be simply too far, even though you can carry a higher speed. It might just be that you're travelling too far. Your late turn in here is interesting. I'm not doing that, but we'll talk about why it's working for you and whether maybe we can find a combination of both of ours. But certainly you're finding... I know I'm speaking too soon, but normally through that corner where we just spun, you're finding that easier because of the approach angle you're at now. That time, it obviously just got the better of you, but you're right. Being wider into there definitely makes your life easier aiming through to here. Going round the outside of this one is not a bad shout. I've done both extremes, and I found very, very similar outcome in terms of lap time. So it shows there's not necessarily one answer. So you can do what works for you. And actually on that last lap, going wide around here and then cutting back looked pretty good. But it's more about what's happening to the car here in that phase. So kind of the final approach to that second apex phase in that last corner is really crucial. And it's how we arrive there. So we'll talk about that in a sec. Maybe let's just do this final lap and then have a little rest. But you've done a really good job on this first run.
Overslowed there.
But that is the kind of decision you need to make is, do you want to do your late wide line that you were telling me about, where you get to keep a higher minimum speed and get an easier exit, but you're travelling much further, or do you want to just cover shorter distance but have to be forced to slow a bit more in the middle? So it's
so that last one was interesting because I went way wider on that last one, and I made up a whole bunch, but I forgot to shift down,
right,
and so
okay.
I lost it all.
Okay.
So my exit was poor, but I made up like a bunch in there.
And you've done a couple of 108.5s there now, and that's actually really not very far away from the pace I was doing. So if you're all right, just park the car somewhere here. The conditions aren't going to get any better or worse, so you can just stop it there and hop out of the car, and let's just run through your fastest couple of laps there and look at what worked and what didn't. I'll show you what I'm doing and see if we can take a look and see whether we can come to a conclusion what's the best compromise, or maybe you could try a couple of things I'm doing. But like I was saying whilst you were driving, there's not necessarily one completely correct answer. You can do totally polar opposite things and find that you kind of meet in the middle in terms of the lap time. And that's when the changeable conditions, that's when that really comes to the fore, because at some point there will be an ideal way when it's drying or when it's getting wetter. Certainly there will be a better compromise of the two options as the conditions change, but they're not changing here, so let's see what works. So you're going into turn 1 down to second gear, it sounds like. So that's the first thing that's slightly different between us. I'm going down to first gear to get a better drive off the corner. However, being in first gear will mean the wheels will spin more easily, and if the rear wheels aren't spinning and you're accelerating hard, there's going to be more weight transfer off the front, and the front end will get lighter. So you have to be even more aware of what's happening at the front axle and at the rear axle if you choose to go down an extra gear. However, provided it's not just ridiculously wheel spinny. And I actually found this car's not that powerful, so it wasn't like you touch the throttle and immediately you were spinning the wheels. You can get a slightly nicer punch off the corners, but second is certainly not bad. So let's see how it goes here. It's like you've got traction control. Yeah, I can just hear the revs are really low. So I think you're probably suffering here, even if you get the exit, you know, the line exactly right. I think if you were one gear lower, the car would power off the corner better. So that's the first thing I'm going to say to try on the next run. But bear in mind, when you go down to first, if you do that early, it'll be like someone's pulled the handbrake on and it's going to try and spin you around on the entry. So you might have to click down a little bit later than you would if it was, you know, in the dry, obviously. So that's turn one, but I quite like your approach around there. And in fact, you go down a gear just there. I hear you just click down a gear on the exit. So I think you realised on that lap. But yeah, I found tighter at turn one was the fastest way for me. Right. So you kind of half commit to the puddle on this lap. But it doesn't unsettle you at all. You go through very straight wheels and you get to stay on the power. And as we discussed, you're kind of avoiding this one. I did both ways, and depending on which one worked at the time, they both worked. If I went through that puddle and braked like early, so before you got to the puddle, you scrubbed off enough speed that you can then bleed off the brakes over the puddle and then reapply. Because obviously the grip level is changing as you go over different surfaces. So you don't get away with a consistent level of brake pressure like you would in the dry. You have to kind of adapt your pressure based on what's underneath the tyres. But what you're doing here is totally fine, totally valid way of taking it. You're on a more consistent surface all the way around and means you can probably stay on the power a bit later. And you're doing what looks like here probably quite a typical wet line where you're, you know, avoiding going to the inside, so your wheels are straighter for longer. You're not having to turn tight for as long around here, and then you're going to go for a cutback. But the problem is we never made the cutback, so we kind of just followed a consistent. In fact, you can see the seam in the racetrack here. We kind of just follow this consistent line round the middle there. So, I mean, this obviously was working to a degree. But I would consider try cutting back. So slowing the car even more here, rather than kind of holding this average, what are we doing? 68, 70, so we're like 70, 68, 67, 68. Kind of constant around there. You could try getting it slowed more, pivoting here, and aiming back at the apex. That's just to consider. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best way. I don't even remember what I was doing, so we'll take a look at mine in a minute once we watch this. But you got around there, and the rev stayed relatively high, so it obviously wasn't terrible at all. So what happens here? I also like, you're being quite brave with the edge of the track, but not touching the white line. It would be very easy to try and stay too far away from it, but... So this lap, we went for the inside, but as you said, you overslowed a bit. And actually, you can see the car almost turns in too well. There's no, even though it's very slippery, there's no hint of understeer as you turn in. And I would expect, if you're a little bit more on the limit, there'd be at least a little bit of understeer. Just, you know, you'd be, if you're kind of closer to the limit of the fronts. But you turn in and it goes, bam, straight in. And then you voiced to me, okay, I overslowed it a bit there. And actually, the fact you were able to exit quite so tight, again, probably suggests that you could have gone in a little bit quicker. But I appreciate you're trying to stay right to carry speed through this left-hander here. So we stayed pretty wide that time. I think you can probably get away with covering slightly less distance through here, but in the dry, it would be obvious. In the wet, if you're finding more grip, if you're finding more purchase on maybe it's a more abrasive asphalt around the outside or something like that, it's not a bad idea. I found just taking a slightly shorter line was better, but let's have a look here. So you've arrived on a really good... You can actually see the track, to me, looks slightly grippier here. You mentioned it on a previous corner that you're on like a higher spot. I think this is one of those. It's not a lot, but you can kind of see it looks like a matte colour in the braking zone here. So I think maybe this is a little bit drier, but it doesn't feel much different, to be honest. And on this lap, you braked quite late, went around the outside. Did you say this improved? Was this any good around there?
It was good, but I didn't drop down.
Right, so, we were at gear too high, so you didn't benefit from the acceleration on the exit.
But the entry speed was good.
Yeah, and then you drop down just here. I just heard the gear go down, so... Yep, okay, so that's another thing to bear in mind. Just make sure you're proactive with being in the right gear. You can use that bit of engine braking. And 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 it will also help you a bit as long as you're not really early with the downshift, so you're locking the rears. It's almost like you're shifting your brake bias rearward slightly by going down to the correct gear, and obviously then you exit with better acceleration. But that's good that worked. Right, what did we do into the final corner on this lap? Right, so what I like to begin with is you're not diving for an early apex, because if you do, you're gonna just drift wide, and then your exit's gonna be terrible. So you're deliberately going straighter for longer, and you're kind of to the left-hand side of this bit of seam in the asphalt. And then this is the phase I was saying is really crucial. Annoyingly, right at the point you would ideally be aiming at the apex, there's a load of standing water, so this complicates things a lot. Your track effectively narrows artificially here to here, because if you touch that at the speed you're going to be going there, you're just going to skate wide. So the line that I would want to do through here, just in low grip condition, if it was wet but with no standing water, I'd say we want to be wide and then cut back to quite a late apex, but it means the wheels are straight and we're on the power pretty early. However, this bit here really restricts you, and you just can't use the apex there. So, or certainly if you try it, it affects the car, affects it quite badly. You're actually understeering past it though, so you don't have that problem on this lap. And in fact, if we look at your steering angle, as we get to the phase where you want to be applying more power, your steering's increasing a bit more and more. We've got a lot of understeer at this point, and that suggests we probably should have waited a little bit longer before we got on the power. We're still increasing the steer. We're still increasing the lock at this point. So this is the phase, I would say, probably from as you approach like this puddle here, around here. This is where ideally we'd start to be reducing the lock, or at the very least maintaining a certain amount, so that when the track opens up in front, then we can straighten up. But the fact that you're having to increase more and more and more says I think we probably didn't get something right back here. Maybe you got on the power too soon. Maybe we weren't out wide enough here to angle back to the inside. But I think there's a slightly better compromise to be had here. But it's bloody difficult because it's a high-speed entry. And so there's a lot of risk involved in going out wide, because it effectively means you've got zero leeway if you've misjudged it by 2 miles an hour, you're off on the grass. So it's tricky, but in an ideal world, let's assume you do judge it correctly, or we're just slightly more cautious and you just drive the car there on purpose. I think there's a slightly better compromise, but we'll have a look. Again, I don't even remember what I was doing. But definitely we want to avoid this here, where you've got loads of steering angle on, it's understeering, and we're aiming at the painted curb, because you just know if I touch that, I'm screwed. And so you're having to wait so long to get on the power. We want to be on the power back here, not flat out, but we want to be starting to think about increasing it more flat. Whereas you're barely on it at this point. Now you're on it, avoiding that curb. So there's a lot of lap time to be gained just in that corner. I think that's maybe the biggest gain to be had. So let's just have a look, and let's see the conclusion I came up with. Let's go with this one. And again, I was not doing the same thing on every lap. I changed lap to lap to lap. This is just, at this point, by the end of, I did like 20 laps here, this is what I thought was my favourite compromise. Let's go on board and have a look. So turn 1, you're going to see me go down to first gear quite early. So I'm already down to first. And this is my minimum speed, and I'm using a bit of that puddle. And I don't remember how much of these I used, but let's see. Quite a lot of puddle 1. Quite a lot of puddle 2. But that then pushes me deep into here. So my braking continues all the way to like here. So I'm just going to show you that little section again. Let's just go back to the start. Again, this doesn't mean you have to do this. And the big difference you'll notice, this is kind of what I mentioned at the start, is I'm living on my wits a bit in terms of the movement of the car. So by doing exactly what I do here, you have to deal with the oversteer, which you see here. And probably again on the exit maybe. Little tiny bit, not much there. But certainly there and here. And the big difference, I can't see your throttle trace live. We can see it on the data afterwards. If I go in super slow-mo, you'll notice as I go over this water, you can see exactly what I'm doing with the throttle. I'm anticipating that I'm about to go over water. And so before I even get there, I've reduced to half throttle to avoid spinning the wheels. As I come off there, I'm trying to get back on the power. Obviously, there's a bit of oversteer. I'm then going over this second one, because I have literally no choice. The speed that I've carried over the first one pushes me out here, and I've decided that if I want to carry speed, I'm going to have to just deal with this horrible standing water. I could avoid it, but I'd have to go too much slower. So I go over the second one. I'm braking before the curb. I think I mentioned that to you before, that's probably what you have to do. So on the brakes here already, and then doing nothing over the water. See how it's like the pedal inputs completely cease as I sail over the water, and then they come back on again the minute I'm off the water. And that's the way I'm able to go across it without the car doing something untoward. If I was braking hard over it, I'd lock a wheel. And I don't want to be locked as I arrive back on the asphalt. I want to be rotating still, and then I've got my braking performance when I need it back on the asphalt. And likewise, obviously, I don't want to spin in the rear wheels. So that's why. But obviously, I'm arriving here faster, and so I'm just trying to create a really straight braking zone. And you see, I stay straight quite a long time until like here. Now it feels like the speed's probably off, and then we try and get back to the inside. So, you know I mentioned on your video trying to hook back to that second apex? I didn't really make it here. But I also wasn't doing the wide cutback line. So I've done my apex, I've done early. And then I do get a bit closer to the inside, but I never make it fully back to the inside. Maybe there's a slightly quicker way. Maybe I could have stopped it more, but on this lap, this is what felt the best.
You're about at the same speed as I was there too. I think our minimum speeds are identical.
Okay, that's good. That's well spotted. Right, 90-degree right. This is what I'm doing. I'm treating the track like I've got less room, basically. The standing water here would make me understeer too far wide, so I'm getting near it, but trying not to drive on it. But what I am doing is going outside, inside, outside, and letting the car flow. And I didn't mean to fast forward that. And obviously on your lap we just watched, you trying to stay over here. So if you do go for this line, allow yourself the freedom to run out a bit wider. However, then the compromise that I've made is I will not be on as good a trajectory through here as you were. But I feel like I've made up enough time through the corner that it justifies a slightly worse left-hander here. Again, there's going to be some anticipation. You're going to see my throttle reduce before I get into this corner, because if I stay on the power until I need to come off, it's too late. I'm going to just run. I'll already be pushing wide. So here we go. So I'm lifting now, waiting, and then back on. And I'm actually still able to pretty much get back over to where I wanted to be. So it's, again, you can kind of make your choice. For me, I felt like that was the best compromise. That's where I saw the most green on my Delta. And I have no idea what I did on this lap through here. Okay, kind of medium with a late apex. Okay, so I didn't just dive in early like I might do in the dry. I didn't go fully around the outside either. I went for like a slow, still trailing the brakes until about here. So quite long late brake. And then just very delayed throttle. So waiting until the car's like facing out of the corner here before we get to full throttle. Because I died a few times on that curb. And then sorry, go on, Pete.
No.
And then final corner. Again, I have no idea. I can't remember what I did, but let's see. Right, okay. That's interesting. It's always so funny watching yourself back. When you're doing a thing subconsciously and then you then review it. So I was saying to you, it's really treacherous to get near the edge here because you've got no leeway. You know, you might fall off. And what I'm doing to avoid that is I'm going to the outside, but I'm kind of cutting across to it. So I know the car's going to force me wide. So I'm kind of going diagonally, and I'm letting the car slide out to here. But I am fully wide though at this point. So this is what we were talking about a moment ago, with then trying to cut back to the inside. I hope this looks all right. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, that's kind of what I was hoping I'd see. So I'm really deliberately waiting to get on the power. I'm not getting on early and then going wider, and like riding it out like you had to. You were basically like, well, I guess we're sliding. I'm gonna just have to wait. I'm kind of anticipating that. And I'm going further round before I then commit to the power. so that I've just got an easier angle. You know, the wheels are straighter earlier, and I think you see the wheels straighten as we get onto the straight rather than apply more. I'll go in half speed and give you the steering angle here. So yeah, I'm aiming for the end of the puddle because that's where I can get tightest to the inside. And here we're reducing the steering. Obviously, some of that's oversteer, but then, I mean, you could do that without the oversteer, and then I obviously touch the painted line a bit, and it's very sketchy. But the main thing is, once the steering angle gets to here, it doesn't increase really anymore, does it? It stays constant, and then reduces. And it would have reduced more gradually if I hadn't had that snap of oversteer. I was obviously slightly too keen on the gas. But what it means is, look how early I'm at full throttle, because I can see the angle. I don't think I stay there. I think I probably modulate it a bit as the car understeers and oversteers and whatever. Yeah, you see, I'm off, back on.
Yeah.
But certainly, as an average, I'm able to get to full throttle all the way back here. And I think on your one, we got to full throttle about here, you know, when we were exiting. And that's the big, big difference. So the way to achieve that, I know I'm being quite specific now, but this is we're just talking about this particular corner. This will be similar, though, in other corners of this profile on other tracks. I think it's quite rare for a long, fast corner like this in the wet to be better to go tight, because you just have to deal with understeer for far too long. By doing what we're doing in this little demo here, is we're basically just, we're like, right, I'm going to take this into my own hands and just change the profile of this corner, because sticking on the inside, this car is just going to push. I've got too much steering angle on, basically, all the way around. So that's it. That's the one probably definite change I'd make from yours. All the other things we've just spoken about, they're kind of optional if you can make your technique work. But certainly on this next run, I'd say get down to first gear before you're into turn 1. You don't have to have the car oversteering like I did. Try and have a really late but tight apex. So maybe don't get to the inside too early. You can run slightly wide and then make sure the car pivots at a point that means you can aim at a late apex. And you can force it to pivot. You know, you can slow it down, tweak the brakes a bit. Just like a nudge of the brakes will really make the front end go in, because you're going quite slow anyway at that point. Optional use of the standing water, but just remember the coming off the inputs in anticipation of the standing water, especially this one if you try it. And once you're through it, if you do use that second one, you have to brake quite long and late, and it has to be quite smooth pressure, otherwise it's just going to lock up. But you can equally just carry on doing your current version through there. You're not going to gain a lot of time from what I'm doing there. This one, maybe try and get slightly tighter on the exit, so maybe a slight more of a pivot will work, but you're doing a pretty decent job through there. This will be quite a big time gain. I did try doing the outside line through here, and I just couldn't. I was always losing half a second or so. So I think when you've got a short apex corner like this on a wet track, generally you're almost forced to take a kind of dry line, unless there's an obvious benefit specific to a certain track. Like sometimes, on some tracks, there is just way more grip around the outside. So even though this is a much shorter line to go take the dry line through here, there's just so much more grip around the outside that you just got to do it. This track, it's a much more consistent level of grip side to side. So that isn't the case here. So I think you kind of just have to take the more short apex and just carry as much speed as you can get away with without obviously running off the track on the exit. You just have to judge it. But this is why I say it's so track specific. There could be like a patch of asphalt here which has been relaid, and it's just way more grippy. Equally, I've been to tracks in the wet where normally the wet line would be slightly wider, but they've relaid the inside just because it's worn out through use, and it's a much tighter knit, brand new tarmac, and it's just much more grippy. So you can afford to kind of understeer to the apex, and then it grips, and then it hooks you around. So it's so track specific. And sometimes you'll find a concrete curb that isn't painted that's just way more grippy again. So you can use the curbs rather than having to avoid them. Anyway, but as a rule, or as a rough guideline, when there's a short apex like this, it's like a short 90-degree corner, where there's like a singular apex point, generally it's more like the dry line, and that's what we've got there. It's the long corners like the final one where you've got more of a specific wet line. And again, if you do end up tight like I do on the exit here, anticipate how much throttle you're going to give it here. Not necessarily because of the oversteer, but because of the push that you're going to get that's going to run you out to this exit curb. And then I think your wide line here wasn't a bad idea. Again, you can also try, just explore a tight one where your minimum speed is quite late. Where's mine? So it's there. And then it's speeding up. It's quite a brief 59k there, and then speeding up again. Just because you'll have straighter wheels earlier on the exit. And then, as we said, final corner. Even if you don't risk it as much on the entry as I do. You see, I have this oversteer here. I'm like, shit, and I just make it. You don't have to do that. You can be under control and still drive to this point. So be wide before this kind of gravelly bit starts. I'm not looking for it, but just as a reference point. And really delay getting back on the gas until you can feel that you're aiming back towards like this late apex, effectively where the curb ends here. And that'll just give you more room. You'll have straighter wheels. I think you'll gain a ton of time on the exit. There we go. I've just given you loads of things to try. Let's go try them. Let's do it. Sorry that was such a long chat. Wet weather is so much stuff to talk about. Can you still hear me, Pete? Hello, hello? Have I just been talking to myself? Are you there, Pete?
Yeah, sorry, I cut out there for a second.
That's alright. Did you hear any of that? Or all of it, hopefully?
Yeah, just the very end.
You only heard the very end.
No, I've been gone for about 5 seconds.
Okay, fine. Cool. No problem. Right, so, all I said at the very end was, I've just spoken for a long time. Let's go try some of those things. Because again, this isn't a case of where I'm saying, you need to do this. Like, this is the wet line. It's much more a case of, let's try this out. Let's see if you can make this way work. And if it requires additional car control, if you're finding the car's getting away from you more, let's see if we can adapt to that and anticipate it earlier, catch it earlier. Maybe there's more lap time to be gained if you're more comfortable with the car moving around, for example. So let's go and try and practice that and access it. But you don't have to do exactly any of the stuff I just showed you. But the final corner, I'd like you to try that wide line to then cut back to the apex. That's the one thing I'd like to see you give it a go, because I think there's quite a lot of time there. But let's do it.
Great.
If you ever are like pushing wide, by the way, for a significant amount of time, if you are like we saw on your replay of the final corner there, for example, if you are like understeering and it feels like you need to increase the steering angle and it's going wider, you know, it's happening over several seconds, as early as you can manage, try and do something about it. And this would be the same in the dry, it's just exaggerated in the wet. If you feel that happening, the earlier you feel it and get off the gas and actually probably like tweak the brake a bit, like do a little bit of double pedaling, like affect the angle of the car as early as possible, and then you'll be able to get back to a higher amount of throttle earlier. That last corner is a really good example of it.
Right.
You're good?
Yep. All right.
Cool. This is really, I really enjoy doing this. It's such a different session to what we normally would do. So cool. It's so difficult and really stretches your driving brain. Cold tyres are particularly treacherous as well.
Yeah, I don't think that was
That's
that
funny.
one was not effective.
There's a Gran Turismo advert. That's isn't it strange seeing a different racing sim advertised?
Yeah, I guess maybe it's the
It must just be
maybe
a real
movie.
sponsor. I was going to say it must just be a real sponsor of the track, and they have to put the real sponsor boards up. It's
Oh
not
yeah,
like
or that.
iRacing is a kind of different market to Gran Turismo anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that was a decent effort. So even though you went in quite tight, you can still make that work as long as you're proactive with getting the car pivoted near the end and not letting it ride out too far. So I thought that was going really well then, and then it just spat you round on the end of that second bit of standing water. Like I say, you don't have to use that. You might find, though, if you're going quick enough through the first bit of that chicane, you have to use that second one. I wonder whether you just braked as you were still on it at the end. It was close.
I think that's what happened. Yeah.
I just watched it back. Yeah, it's difficult to tell because I can't see your inputs in real time, but the car just tried to snap around. It was all stable, and then at the last minute, it just tried to snap around. But yeah, just take your time to get back into it. You have to just get a feel for the car again.
That was a guess.
That white line moment took away all of your braking zone.
Yeah. That was a cascade of sliding.
It's got to go wrong a bunch of times for it to eventually go right. So this is why we do this now, and then you'll be closer when you're in an actual event that you care about. So. Good job. Well controlled that time. That looked like you very deliberately weren't pressing any pedals until you were back on, I was going to say dry land, but back on slightly drier land. That was good through there. That looked nice through there as well, by the way. Apart from the oversteer on exit, so that's, you can control that just by being slightly more progressive getting back on the gas. But through the middle of that 90 right, it looked pretty good.
Yeah, that felt good.
I think we want earlier, firmer braking. I was like, in my virtual car, sitting here like, when are we going to brake? Like, it felt like we were sailing into the final corner at a higher speed than I would be comfortable with, put it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, so same again through here, but just be careful on throttle on the exit. Yeah, well done. Good job. Good anticipation in the left-hander as well. Just make sure we get those downshifts done during the braking phase.
Yeah.
I know it's like sketchy because you don't want to lock the rears, but they've got to be done. So just do it when the wheels are at their straightest. I feel like we're missing a downshift here as well. What gear?
Yeah, that was input error. I didn't pull the clutch enough.
That's all right. Yeah, it's tough in this car, isn't it?
Well, and the baby's sleeping, so I don't have the butt kicker on.
Right, got it.
And normally that helps with a clutch car so much.
Yeah, I agree. The butt kicker is strangely useful. It's like more useful than it should be almost for gear change. I love having it on.
Well, so I was in, I went back to the Formula V
Yeah.
with the butt kicker, and I always found that car difficult to shift in. But with the butt kicker, I won 2 races and podiumed in like 5 more. And it was like, I mean, it was night and day.
Okay, so that was a little closer, but you could see we got on the power too early because then it pushed wide and you had to get back out of it. So it was closer though. Try and make this like late apex where you've got a slow, late minimum speed through here.
Yeah.
That's a decent effort through there. I like the patience on throttle. You really let it rotate around there. Then we can probably turn in slightly earlier for that 90 right, and that'll let you carry a little bit more speed. Well controlled.
Ooh, just too little, too late.
Yeah, I was going to say, was that maybe just like slightly too gentle on the brakes, and it meant that you were just too late getting it slowed, and then by the time you realised it was just, you just ran out of track.
Yeah.
It's definitely better to err on the side of caution. I think you're going to gain a lot less time over a stint in the rain by trying to be brave on the brakes. It's almost always better to be like, cautious on the brakes so that you can be really good in the middle of the corner.
Yeah.
In the dry, you can go a couple of meters later on the brakes, and you might gain a bit. If you go slightly deep, it's not the end of the world. But in this, if you go a little bit deep, you're going really deep, especially when we're aiming already to end up near the grass on the in the middle of the corner, on this corner, for example. So you don't really have much scope for additional braking distance.
Right.
So I would err on the side of caution so you can be really accurate in the middle. Okay, nice exit that time. Good job. Make sure we get the downshift done. And I would say earlier turning into this 90 right. So kind of look for the apex and then just squeeze the power through the middle. Nice. Yeah, good. Well done for... Oh, I was just about to say, well done for getting off the power on the paint. You actually had it under control, and then it just started spinning the wheels as you rejoined the tarmac. But you were doing all the right stuff up until that point. It was just a tiny, tiny bit too much gas as you rejoined the track. This is good that like all of these things that are going wrong, like will bring you one step closer to it not going wrong in the future. So this is good. Okay, so remember to delay the throttle until you know you've got it pivoted. And then when you can see your exit, go for it. And it's a slow, late minimum speed. And then early power. Yeah, good. That's the nicest I've seen you do turn one. It certainly looked visually nice. I was waiting for the brakes. I was waiting for the brake pressure, and it was like you were a bit worried of it locking up or something. That's what it felt like.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Really good parts of this lap though, like nice things, nice elements to it. So again, normally in the wet, a late apex where you've got it pivoted well in the middle phase is good. Right, let's see what we do through here. It's mainly about not being too hard on the gas too soon. Like, get far enough round the corner that you can get on the power.
Early there. Yeah.
Yep, and you'll feel it here. You feel it at this point. Considering we went off though, a 1:10's not bad there. So there must have been some better elements. That's nice. Really tidy. I like it. Okay, so make sure we get near the puddle for the apex. And then you can get on the power pretty early. Well done. Really nice anticipation there. Okay, final turn. Let's see. Yeah, so you said to me last time you cut in too early, so resist that urge and just flow to the outside. Remember, you can be quite wide pretty late as long as we get it pivoted back to the inside near the end of the puddle. Yeah, so much better. Pete, so much better. Just control the rear. Good man. That was way better on the exit. And then I think that's your fastest lap so far, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Good. And it was by no means a perfect lap in other areas, but that last bit just looked really good. That's really good. So the bit of that last lap that probably wasn't perfect was the final hairpin. So the penultimate corner, basically. We had a period in the middle where the car was just pushing and pushing and pushing, and you didn't do anything about it until really late. You kind of... We had a plateaued minimum speed. So you were doing like roughly the same speed for quite a long time. So that's the kind of area where I want you to realise it's happening earlier and fix it. Like, touch the brakes, get off the gas, whatever you need to do to get the car pivoted. So like, about now, for example, like, instead of it just gradually running wider, we can angle it back to the inside so then you can get on the power harder.
Okay, so I was already oversteering there, so I should
Okay.
more brakes, right?
Sorry, I didn't see the oversteer. You were understeering through the middle
Oh,
part.
sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so the moment you sense it's happening, unless it's happening at a reduced rate and it's, you know, the understeer is going away, if it's just there, try and do something about it as early as you can.
Okay.
And that's generally get off the power, nudge the brake. So I don't want you to actually brake. I want you to just touch it enough to make the car pivot. And it just means you can then get back to throttle so much earlier. You're doing a great job though, this is nice. So like now, for example, if you feel it's running... So where it wanted to go wider and wider, if we cured it in the middle, if we like proactively pivoted in the middle, you wouldn't have ended up wide where you were on that one, if that makes sense. And this is, you know, this is the same stuff that we do in the dry. It's just, it happens more slowly in the wet, obviously because the corners take longer, and it's like more crucial as well. What it also means is, if you do go in too early, you know, if you do, say you dive for the inside in the final corner, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to run wide. Because you can proactively, you can still fix it. Might not be the perfect corner that it would have been, but you can make the best of it. Whereas if you just ride it out and run wider and wider, then it's kind of guaranteed to be a bad one. Good job. Yeah, you definitely were on top of it that time.
It's always different. I think I carried too little speed that time.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I was in too high a gear.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the entry was a little bit slow. Ooh, okay. This is looking like all right. As long as we're patient with the exit, let's go. Yeah, nice. Good effort. So that was kind of a good mid-compromise that time. And it was one of your quicker laps. Again, that was a good late apex, and you didn't push wider and wider. That was good. Nice. You managed to pivot it back. So it went deep, but you then used that to your advantage, which is good. So just because it's run wide doesn't mean it has to be a completely bad thing. You can claw back some of those tenths. And in the wet, you're not going to be consistent. Like, not in the same way as you would be in the dry. I'm certainly not. And so you kind of have to adapt each one. Whatever line you end up with, each lap and each corner, make the best of it. So if you go a bit wide, get it fixed and get it pointed back. Yeah, well done. Look at how well you pivoted that back towards the apex at the end. You didn't just let it go. You fixed it, and actually it came out really well. Got your best lap. So that's good. This is a very, very good theme to run with as well. Like, in general, like making the best of whatever line you happen to end up on, because of, your entry's going to vary lap to lap, corner to corner. Okay, I want you to go through this 90 right a bit quicker this time. I think we're over slowing it each time. So just release the car to flow in. That's nice. Now, just obviously be careful of that exit curve. So your mid-corner speed, though, is way better. So if you can do something very, very similar to that, just not quite so fast that you end up on the exit curb.
Well, and I was on the exit curb and I put the power in. I think I actually might have even been able to hold it if I had just been a little bit more patient.
Yeah, and that's fair enough as well. That's another thing. On the same theme as what I was just talking about with, making the best of what you end up with, sometimes you're going to end up on a painted bit. But just make sure you realise that as early as possible and adapt your input to account for it. And like you said, the thing that you should have done is, okay, I'm about to go on the painted curb. When I get there, I will be off throttle. Or, shit, I'm on the painted curb. Get off the fucking throttle.
Yeah.
But, the more you do it, the sharper your correct response to these things will be. But I think really a good foundational thing is to not beat yourself up when you do end up in a position on track or a speed into a corner or an angle that you didn't really intend. Just fix it as quick as possible or make the most of it as best you can. That's wet weather driving. And that then feeds into when the track is in changeable conditions. I think you just caught the white line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that then feeds into how we make the most of the changeable conditions. Because it's never ideal and it's never consistent. Oh, you just saved that. That was nearly grass. Your apex on the exit here of turn 1 is so much better now. It's like, I'm confident in where you're going to end up each time now. Okay, so let's go for a good minimum speed through here, but just don't end up on the curb if you can help it. Good job. Well done. Okay, decent lap time. And again, I'm sure you'll agree there were sections of that lap that were not perfect, but you're now consistently in these low 108s. This is good. Even when it doesn't go right. Because you're not like throwing away a lap just because it wasn't perfect. You're just kind of dealing with it and then from that point onwards trying to be as good as possible. This slow, tight line here seems to be working quite well because what it means for you is you know what's going to happen. You can consistently judge how the car's going to react. So that's good.
Yeah. Ooh,
oh, you were doing well. You just were like, there was a slight amount of greediness that I saw there. You were like, this is good. I'm going pretty quick. And you kind of ran with it. And it was just a tiny bit too much. You nearly got away with that.
Well, it's this odd balance of you don't want to not push,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because like we're not here to have like a leisurely Sunday drive, right?
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
so you want to be pushing, but then it's like how much.
This is the time to do it though as well, Pete. You know, this is what these
Yeah.
sessions are for. So I think into turn 1 there, we're getting to our minimum speed a bit too soon. So your line is good, but I think you can slow down over a longer period. You don't need to be going that slow as early as you are. I think we can... I want your apex speed to be the same as it currently is. Just be going quicker in the middle phase. You've got enough grip that you can be going a little bit, 5-10 miles an hour quicker on that approach to the apex. As long as you get it slowed down at the end. And then it'll tuck in. Okay,
That was
so
actually faster.
in the final corner.
Yeah, I gained 0.8.
Good job. Yeah, so obviously the way that you're driving, because you were like, you're comfortable with it under control through there, and you're taking a much shorter distance. Similar to how you keeping this tight line through here works for you, that's good. Like, that's fine. If that's how you need to drive through, in this car, in this track, to be the quickest you can be in this session, that's totally valid. There's no point driving around attempting the line someone else is doing, but actually just losing time every lap because you're not currently in a position to maximize that. The more experience you get, and the more comfortable you get with your car control, which will just gradually just get slightly better and better and better. You can't help it. Then other lines will become available to you. This looks pretty good at the moment. This line you just took through there. Let's see what happens on the exit. It looked like a good overall lap. Yeah, another one of your decent ones.
That's faster.
Good. Well, you made it work.
And then I was looking up at the delta and I missed my braking point, but that's all right.
In this run, in the second half of this run, you've done 68.0, you've done 68.2, 67.9, 68.1, 68.4, 68.2. You've done a whole host of laps that are all what we would consider probably for this, this session, your first session in this car on this track, pretty strong. And the 67, what did I do? I was only a couple of seconds down the road from that. So I think that's a pretty decent effort there. This looks better. Like, the way for me, watching the way you're telling the car what to do, like forcing it to do certain things, it just looks like you're building a greater connection between like your input and how you're like forcing the car to get to the angle you need it to get to. You're not just accepting the angle that it gives you on a particular trajectory. Again, really, really good through there. 68.0, lovely. It's this whole not treating the corner as one static thing. The corner is a living thing, and you can manipulate the angle of the car and the attitude of the car all the way through it. At any point you choose, you can change what the car's doing. It's just about monitoring it correctly and being proactive. I know I've said that word a lot of times. It's just so important in the wet.
I was braking with a little bit of...
Yeah, we had a little angle on when we brake. That's all right.
Yeah.
It's not a problem. So let's do one more lap. Let's do a balls to the wall, maximum risk lap.
Okay.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm giving you permission for it to go completely wrong on this last lap. All I'd say is try and get a good entry to the final lap if you can. Or you might just save it. Maybe not. Okay, get the best possible entry you can from a stationary position in the final corner. Oh, good entry. Really nice. You got down to your minimum speed when you needed it, not before. That was brave. I heard the throttle on after the puddle, which was very, very brave. Really good effort so far. I'm enjoying this. You're going to make it. Good. And now just wait until you can feel you're going to make the exit and get the wheel straight as you can. Let's go. Oh, so close. It was the white line, but it was your quickest lap. You did it.
Wow.
Sideways across the line, half a second quicker. That's because I gave you permission to go quicker. So well done. That's a great, really good way to finish that run, though, Pete. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah.
And don't feel like you have to stop. You know, the session's going to carry on for another hour. So this is still up if you want to use it. But so some real positives there. Wow, the raindrops look so good in the puddle. Some real positives.
My
Sorry, go on.
optimal is 106.6.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I'm a second off the optimal, which is kind of interesting.
So every lap through that, through the whole of this last hour or so, even though this isn't a thing we've been concentrating on, you will have just been building greater mental connections between the car does this, so I need to do this. The car does this, I need to do this. You know, constantly having to correct, constantly having to, you know, apply opposite lock, constantly having to adjust your throttle input based on what the car's doing. So that's just a good thing to keep on top of anyway. So that's kind of happening in the background and we're just not really talking about it. But in terms of exploring different potential techniques in the wet, I think that was a real good starting point. Like you don't get many better first hours than that, and I really enjoyed watching you figure it out. And it's almost just like slightly guided learning, because I can't make those mental connections for you between if I go here and I do this, the car reacts in a certain way. You have to just drive and it will build the connections. But encouraging you to try stuff and feel what it's like, it's really rewarding to see you do it and then go, oh, okay, that kind of worked, or oh, okay, that feels tricky, but if I do something slightly different, maybe I can make it work. You just really had an intensive course in driving a difficult car on a very, very slippery wet track. So I think we should maybe do this kind of thing again. Maybe in a different car, maybe a different track, but certainly on a drying track, and certainly on a getting more damp tracks. Hard to make those conditions repeatable. That's the problem, because it's going to get wetter and wetter and wetter, and so we're quite time pressured in the session to, you know, you can't repeat a thing and expect it to be the same.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
yeah. Well, no, but that's why I was saying, when we were trying to figure out what to do today, I'm really looking for general building blocks, you know, tools in the toolbox, so to speak. And I think this was super helpful.
When you mentioned it, I was like, that sounds really good, because you're not going to be, okay, you might be racing at Daytona this weekend or whatever, but you're not going to always be racing at Daytona, and so it's quite nice to do something that's a bit more general, that will apply to lots of cars and tracks. So.
Yeah, and actually, I'm not, because I got permission from the home front to I'll be